Hello. This is a Know Your Rights presentation, and obviously, what you're listening to right now is a recording. So, if you have any further questions, I would encourage you to seek out resources around you, because obviously, I am not live and I cannot answer any questions. But without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. Now, before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping items here. Obviously, any and all information in this presentation is for informational purposes only. This is not legal advice. I am not a lawyer. I am not in any way, shape, or form affiliated with the legal system here in the United States. So, do your own research, obviously. And if you have any specific situations or any particular concerns that are specific to your own situation, I encourage you to seek out legal advice, legal aid, legal help in any way, shape, or form that you can. Um, Also remember that rules change and can be different. So state laws vary, and obviously immigration and customs laws also change when you're at a border, when you're, at an airport. So just to keep that in mind, it's important to, like I said, if you have questions, if you have concerns, and you have a specific situation unique to you, talk to an attorney. It's the best advice I can give you right now. Now, one of the things that I want you to understand is that, barring any kind of special circumstance or a special location or maybe a state law that's different, these rules should apply to you so long as you're physically present in the United States. And that's one of the things that this presentation assumes, by the way, that you are physically here in the United States. Okay? All right. Now, let's begin by, going over what to do in case you were stopped by the police, right? Right. Okay. So, you have the right to remain silent. If you wish to remain silent, tell the officer. Some states may require you to identify yourself to the police if you're suspected of a crime, right? So, identifying yourself, uh, I, I would say, at the very least, have some kind of ID with you, but that's neither here nor there. Like I said, I'm not an attorney. Uh, if you have questions or concerns regarding any of these uh, statements, speak to somebody who is qualified to do so, to advise you. Anyway, obviously, stay calm. Don't run, don't argue, do not resist or obstruct the police in any way, okay? Keep your hands where the police can see them. And you can always ask if you are free to leave. If they say yes, calmly and silently walk away. You don't have to consent to a search of yourself or your belongings. And it is important to verbalize this. It's important to say, I do not consent to any kind of search, right? If you don't say things out loud, uh, then there's no documentation, there's no record that you withheld consent. So it's important to be clear, right? The police officers might not like that, but it's important to be polite but clear that you do not consent. Now, they might search you anyway, but it is important to document the verbalization of you not giving them consent. Now, if you own a car, or if you're riding in a car, or if you're the one driving it, this next one is for you. And what are you going to do if you're stopped in your car, or somebody else's car for that matter? So obviously, if you're the one driving, stop the car in a safe place as quickly as possible. Turn on the car, turn on the internal light, open the window partway, and place your hands on the wheel. Like I said, you want your hands to be visible at all times. And yeah, of course, If the police officer asks, you show them your driver's license, your registration, your proof of your insurance. Um, and if the officer is an immigration agent and they ask to search your car, you can refuse. But again, you have to verbalize this non-consent. You have to say, I do not consent to any kind of search. Um, like I said, if they might search it anyway, especially if they believe that you know, there's evidence of a crime in the vehicle. Um, but it is important to get that documented, the fact that you do not consent to any kind of search of your vehicle. Um, Now, obviously, both the drivers and the passengers have the right to remain silent. If you are a passenger, you can ask if you are free to leave. If the officer says yes, go ahead and silently leave. If the officer says no, you comply with their instructions and you stay put. Now, here's the big one, right? What if you're asked about your immigration status, especially with the laws on the books here in Arizona, and of course with the immigration enforcement also conducting traffic stops and such, this is always a big question. Now remember, you always have the right to remain silent. You don't have to answer a question about where you were born, whether you are a U.S. citizen or not, or how you entered the country. Of course, separate rules apply at international borders and airports, and for individuals on certain non-immigrant visas, including tourists and business travelers. So again, for your own unique situation, you need to consult an attorney. Okay, this is important. Don't make assumptions about the law. Talk to an attorney. I know it costs money, but the advice that the attorney gives you might save your life. So take that for what it is. Now, obviously, if you are not a U.S. citizen and have valid immigration papers, documentations, what have you, you need to go ahead and show those to the immigration agent if they request it, right? And this is crucial. Never, ever lie about your citizenship status or provide fake documentation to an immigration officer. Um, just this is extremely important. Do not ever lie about your citizenship status. Do not claim to be a U.S. citizen if you are not a U.S. citizen, whether in writing or verbally, in any way, shape, or form. Don't do it. Now, what are you supposed to do if the police or immigration agents come to your home? Well, you don't have to let them in unless they have a warrant signed by a judge. Now, uh, a warrant signed by a judge is different from an ICE warrant, okay? And it's important to know the differences in how they look and the language on both of the warrants. And you can find plenty of examples online about the two differences, but understand that there is a difference between a judicial warrant and an ICE warrant. And the only time you have to comply, per my understanding, is if it's a judicial warrant. If it's an ICE warrant, it really doesn't hold much weight in terms of its enforceability, as far as I'm aware. But like I said, I'm just some guy talking into a microphone. I am not an attorney, so take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, you're more than welcome to consult an attorney if you have questions or doubts. Of course, it's important to ask the officer to show you the warrant. Officers can only search the areas for the items listed in the warrant. And an arrest warrant allows people to enter the home of the person listed on the warrant if they believe that the person is inside. A warrant for removal or deportation, also known as an ICE warrant, does not allow officers to enter a home without consent. Okay? Think about vampires, right? Vampires cannot enter a home without consent. The same logic applies here. So if it's an ICE warrant, and you don't consent for them to come to your home, they would be breaking the law, per my understanding, if they entered your home. Um, Now, even if an officer has a warrant, you can choose to remain silent. And if you choose to speak, step outside and close the door behind you before you do so. Now, what are you supposed to do if you're arrested by the police? Well, step one, do not resist. Don't, you know, just don't. It'll only make things worse. So obviously, the first thing is to not resist. Then the second thing would be to invoke your right to silence and to ask for an attorney verbally. So you need to tell the officer that you wish to remain silent and that you want an attorney. And if you can't afford an attorney, the government must provide one for you in terms of criminal proceedings. I'm not so clear about immigration proceedings, so do double check with your own attorney about that. But yes, in terms of criminal matters, if you can't afford an attorney, you must be provided one. Um, Obviously, do not say anything, do not sign anything, or make any decisions without consulting an attorney. And this goes for both criminal and immigration matters. Oftentimes, criminal matters will influence immigration matters in a multitude of ways, which the criminal attorney might not be able to foresee. So, you want an attorney who is either experienced in both criminal and immigration law, or you want two attorneys working on your case, a criminal attorney and an immigration attorney, and for them to work together on your case. Um, Obviously, you have the right to make a phone call. So, and the police cannot listen to a phone call between you and your attorney, right? Don't discuss your immigration status with anyone except your lawyer. It is your business. You keep it to yourself and your attorney. And do not lie to your attorney, please. Um, just that's just sound advice in life. Don't lie to your attorney and don't lie to your doctor, um, or your accountant for that matter. Um, and an immigration officer may visit you in jail. Yes. Uh, do not answer questions or sign anything before talking to an attorney. This is vitally important. You need to understand what you're signing and what the consequences will be down the road for what the actions that they may be asking you to take. So don't do anything until you've spoken to an attorney. Now, obviously, read everything completely. And if you don't understand or cannot read what they are asking you to sign, you need to make that clear and you need to ask for an interpreter. Now, what are you supposed to do if you're taken into ICE custody, also known as Immigration and Customs Enforcement? Well, like I was said in the previous slide, you do have the right to an attorney, but the government will not provide you one. So if you don't have a lawyer, you need to ask for a list of free or low-cost legal service providers, uh, because in immigration proceedings, you are not guaranteed the right to a lawyer. That only applies in criminal proceedings, as far as I'm aware. Now, you have the right to contact your consulate or have an officer inform the consulate of your arrest, right? Um, you need to tell the immigration officer that you wish to remain silent. Do not discuss your immigration status with anyone except your lawyer. And obviously, don't sign anything, such as a voluntary departure or a stipulated removal, or even in some cases, voluntary abandonment of your permanent residency. Regardless, it's the same thing that I've been saying over and over again. Don't sign anything without speaking to an attorney. Okay? If you sign, you might be giving up your opportunity to try and stay here in the U.S. and fight your case. Okay? Now, one thing to know is your immigration number or a number, often called a USCIS number as well. Okay. Um, and go ahead and write that number down and give it to your family. It will help them locate you if you're ever arrested. In fact, this goes for most things. If you have legal documentation, right? And by the way, that legal documentation also includes an inspection stamp. So if you entered the country legally, right? Say you entered using a tourist visa or a student visa, and when you entered, the immigration officer at the airport or at the port of entry or the land crossing stamped your passport, it's important to make a photocopy of that entry stamp that the officer placed in your passport. Make a digital copy and also physical ones, and store them in the cloud somewhere safe where you or your family or loved ones can retrieve those. Um, yeah, I would recommend you do that for every single document that you have, especially as it pertains to immigration. If you have an A number, it would be written on your permanent resident card or your Visa sticker. So that's always a good idea to keep photocopies of that. But yeah, I digress. It's just a bit of advice. Now, if you believe that your rights have been violated, I would say write everything down that you remember, including the officer's badge number and patrol car numbers, if you remember those. Remember, the more time goes on, the more your memory will start to distort and the more things you will forget. So the sooner, the better. Write it down. Um, and obviously, you want to write down which agency the officers were from and any other details. You need to get contact information for witnesses. If you are injured, seek medical attention immediately and take photographs of your injuries. Also, be honest and upfront with the treating physician about what happened. The physician's notes are go into a permanent medical record and they document all of your injuries. So be honest with the treating physician about what happened and how you ended up with said injuries. Um, Obviously, you can file a written complaint with the agency's internal affairs division or the civilian complaint board. In most cases, you can file a complaint anonymously if you wish. So there's that. And finally, I wanted to include a slide with information for the Tucson Rapid Response Team. So when you're dealing with ICE or Border Patrol or someone else, and again, you or someone else can contact the Tucson Community Rapid Response Team. And you can request witnesses and community presence to ensure that your rights are respected. You know, you're not going through this alone. So yeah, call them. And again, you can call them if you're experiencing raids either at home, at school, or at workplace. Prolonged traffic stops by the ICE or ERO. Um, you know, if you're interacting with ICE or if you're interacting with Border Patrol. I want to say that I don't believe that the community response team would be able to respond at the border or at an airport. However, interactions with ICE don't always happen, at a border or at an airport. They could happen at school, they could happen at a workplace. But regardless, you want to call the phone number on this slide, and just request presence, community presence, where you're at. So I just wanted to make sure to include that in there. All right. Well, that concludes the presentation on knowing your rights. Like I said, for your own personal situation, I would highly recommend speaking to an attorney. There are plenty of attorneys that provide free legal consults, and there are also attorneys within the Pima Community College network here that provide low cost legal consults. So yes, get in touch with the appropriate people here at school, and we might be able to help set something up for you if you cannot afford an attorney, or rather, if you can't afford a consult with an attorney.